It's not my fault being the biggest and the strongest. I don't even exercise.
Howdy folks, welcome back to the 80s Toy Museum. Today's review is going to be absolutely gigantic. I had 2 Andre the Giant figures, and now I got 3. I'm a lifelong fan of the 8th wonder of the world. Andre and the Junkyard Dog were 2 of my favorites when I started watching wrestling in '86. This is the second version of the LJN Andre. I had the first version way back in the day. I didn't have too many LJNs, but I absolutely had to have Andre the Giant. This is the Hasbro version from the 90s. I'm really picky when it comes to Andre figures though, because this is a great case of loving the character, loving the persona, but it doesn't sometimes translate into a cool looking, tangible, actual figure. I have this just basically as a nemesis to my Hogan or Warrior Hasbro figures, and this is kind of nostalgia. I mean, I had the first version, and this is the second version of the Andre the Giant LJN figure, which I think actually looks better. I mean, even though I had the original LJN figure, it's one of the rare cases of I don't really need to have it again, even though I had it as a kid, because I just think this version looks better. So many Andre figures have been made that I've seen and I went, nah, it doesn't really do anything for me. So that's why, as much as I love Andre, I only have these 2 figures. But when I walked into GameStop and saw this, I knew this was going to be my definitive Andre the Giant figure. It's FEZZIK. FEZZIK from Princess Bride by fellow knucklehead Todd McFarlane and McFarlane Toys. Not too long ago, I did a review on this guy. Roddy Piper as John Nada. I just am loving seeing some of the wrestlers represented in their most iconic movie roles in action figure form. And I'm a big fan of The Princess Bride too. Really love that movie. And I don't believe I've ever seen a FEZZIK figure. At least not anything like this. I think Andre needs to be properly represented when he's alongside other figures. And sometimes that means working the height a little bit, if you know what I mean. The wrestling fans know what I mean by working the height. Andre, here's a little known fact for you, courtesy of Major Cliff Derlin.
Here's a little known fact.
Andre was not 7'4", as he was always billed in wrestling. He was, they say, probably about 7 feet, or maybe just a hair under that, but in wrestling they always over-exaggerate the heights and the weights. So when they make an Andre figure that's just slightly taller than a wrestler, got a Hulk Hogan figure here too, Andre's arch nemesis. Some of the wrestling Andre figures that I've seen are just slightly taller than the other wrestlers, and I think Andre should be ridiculously taller than everybody else, even if he actually wasn't that much taller in real life. That's real life. These are toys, these are plastic. So for me personally, if I wanted, like, I guess a 6-inch scale Andre, which is what these are, then this has got to be my 6-inch scale Andre the Giant, who will be right in there alongside all my other modern wrestling figures. And before I crack the box open, just show you some of the graphics. There's the Dread Pirate Roberts on the side with Princess Buttercup, FEZZIK, picture of FEZZIK up here, and picture of some of the other figures. The GameStop I went to didn't have these. And I don't know if I'm really interested in picking up the other Princess Bride figures. Diego Montoya, Dread Pirate Roberts. This is one of those things that I love the movie, but just because I love something doesn't necessarily mean I need to have every single piece of merchandise put out by it. This is so similar to the Roddy Piper John Nada figure, though. It's like a crossover figure. It's a Princess Bride FEZZIK. It's also Andre the Giant. Just like this is a Roddy Piper figure, it's also a John Nada figure. Comes in one of the most gigantic clamshells that you'll ever see. And he's got The Rock, which he used in his fight against Dread Pirate Roberts. This guy doesn't really need a rock. And this is such a awesome little detail. Only a super fan would have thought of this and insisted on this being included.
Anybody want a peanut?
I mean it. So before we take a look at the figure, I also wanted to show you this. This is funny. He includes a stand, and it's this teeny tiny stand. It's like a stand for a regular figure. It just looks undersized for Andre the Giant. It's actually sealed in there. It's like glued in on plastic. You can't just slip it out. So I'm just gonna leave that in there because I have a feeling this guy's gonna stand just fine on his own. Whoa! This is incredible. He is such a beefy boy. This is awesome. So he's not just tall. That's the thing about Andre. Andre wasn't just tall. Andre was thick. He was girth, gargantuan. And this is, it's a McFarlane figure. It's a McFarlane movie figure, which I've been collecting for years. I had the Crow, which was one of their first ones. Snake Plissken, a whole bunch of different Terminator. So this is officially one of those, I still call them movie maniacs, figures. And to see an Andre movie maniac, ginormous. Let's see if I can get him to stand though. There we go. That's good. There's the Rock. First thing I want to check out is just to see if he's able to hold this rock. Yeah, cool. Fingers are bendy enough so that they'll actually wrap around the rock, hold it securely. Pretty easy to pop it out though. Andre doesn't need any weapons though. And despite my best efforts, I can't get him to stand. He keeps wanting to fall back, so I have removed this stand right here. I'm always hesitant to use McFarlane stands or NECA stands because I've broken a few of them from having the figure fall over anyway. Let's see how much of a difference that makes. Oh, huge difference. Nice and secure, and that's what I was talking about. It looks, I've never seen a figure have such a tiny stand before. Like just I've seen movie figures have a stand that just goes on one foot, but it looks minuscule on this gargantuan behemoth. And here's a 360, so you can take in all the detail. He's just perfect. He's not over muscled like some action figures sometimes get. He's a little paunchy, like the Giant actually was. The head is a particularly hard thing to get on Andre. It's hard to get that hair, that face, just that look of it. And I like what they've done here. In the packaging, it looked like they might have overdone it on the kind of the dark circles that Andre had around his eyes. But once you get it out of the package, the lighting changes a bit, and it actually looks more like Andre really was. It sometimes happens when you're like in the shade or something like that. One thing that comes to mind is I got a pair of glasses that are just slightly tinted, and they just look slightly tinted, but if I've got like a hat on or if I'm in a room that's not all that well lit, then they look like sunglasses. So that's I guess what was going on with the shading. So if that's a deal breaker for you, if you think the paint job on the face looks horrible, it's actually not that intense once you get it out of the box and into some decent lighting. It's got the big floofy hair like Andre had, and the sideburns. The outfit, I actually wondered if it was cloth when it was in the box because of the texturing on it. It is spectacular. This new technique that toy companies are doing is so impressive to me. This is just like Scareglow's cape. It's plastic, but to the touch, it really almost feels cloth. And it's still got the flexibility of like vinyl. It's got a belt too, with a little bit of a loop on it. No extra hands on him, no swappable hands. But he's got a fist and one opened hand, which is sculpted so that he can easily grab the rock. Here's a look at the pants of the giant and his boots. And articulation. I almost forgot to do articulation because in my mind this guy's a movie maniac, and movie maniac articulation is next to nothing, but this guy is basically like a real action figure. So he has a little bit of head movement. It's tight. Ooh. A little bit scary. It's almost like a ratchet joint. I don't want to mess with that too much. He can look up, but honestly, when did Andre the Giant ever have to look up? Looking down is the important part. I'm not crazy about testing these shoulders out based on my experience with these types of figures. But wow, that's amazing. They get really far up there. Elbow bend, once again. Don't really like playing around with this stuff, but for the purpose of review, elbows bend quite a bit. Hand articulation is fantastic. They are supposed to pivot, turn, maybe. These are stiff. I'm not gonna force it, and they go this way too. And legs, I'm guessing, are going to be next to nothing. They aren't wanting to freely move a lot. I don't want to risk it. Dude doesn't have knee joints. It's funny. I just noticed that. What is this? There's like a... You'd think there's a knee joint. Well, there is supposed to be a knee joint. I'm just not seeing it. Not sure what's... I've never seen a knee joint like that before. It's hidden in the boot. Wow. So you can have FEZZIK kick someone into orbit. So there you go. I don't think it's really needed, but it's cool that it's there. And then these twist. I think, yeah, they do. Foot pivots, goes up and down. Even has a bit of a toe movement. That's pretty impressive for a giant figure. So that's his articulation, but I'm not going to be playing around with this guy. This is a 100% display piece. Gonna plan him and just have him stand there and look awesome, just like the real Andre. But here's a couple of side-by-side comparisons. So yeah, if you've got the LJN Andre, you want to know how big this guy is. He is huge. He's actually bigger than the LJN Andre. And a couple of wrestling figures to compare him with. So here's Piper, John Nada. And this might not be how much taller Andre actually was in real life, taller than Roddy Piper. But when it comes to toys, I want my toy Andre to be this much taller than my toy Roddy Piper or John Nada. Andre was larger than life, and I think his figures should be larger than life too. And next to the Hulkster, Hulk Hogan, just dwarfs him. You can do a recreation of the irresistible force meeting the immovable object. Just recently had the pleasure of doing a commentary track with my buddy Slick, Sean Fuster, Hogan versus Andre. And that is a sight I will never get tired of. It's one of the most iconic images in wrestling. Hulk Hogan looking up, all intense, full of fire, eye of the tiger, looking up at a cool, calm, collected giant.
Hey, all right. Here's a little known fact.
Oh, I got another little known fact. courtesy of Major Cliff Derlin. So Andre the Giant, the reason he absolutely hated the Macho Man, Randy Savage, is because Randy would not stop wearing tons of baby oil. So if you go and watch some Andre and Hulk Hogan matches, Hulk Hogan isn't as baby oiled up as he normally is. When Andre was wrestling Randy Savage for a series of matches, Savage was all oiled up because he believed that he was a little on the small side, yeah. And Randy felt the need to compensate for his lack of height. So he did things like wear super flashy outfits and work out a lot and oil up, make himself extra shiny, which drove the Giant crazy, hated the slippery baby oil, and the Giant decreed, "No more baby oil." And the Macho Man said, "Not having it, So, another reason why the Macho Man is the greatest of all time. Who else would dare defy a Giant than the Macho Man? And alongside the Hasbro Andre, much bigger than that one. And if you want, thanks to the Articulation, you can even do some wrestling moves with him, like a press slam overhead. But if you want to make him your champion, you're going to have to invest in a custom belt, just like Jack Tunney did at Wrestlemania 3. This one is not going to fit him. You could always just sell it to the $1 Million Man, though. Hope you enjoyed this review. Feel free to share, and to join the tribe, hit subscribe. Nerdmaste.